Hi, I'm Derrick, as he said. And I'd like to start by talking about what overfishing is. Overfishing is when fishermen are catching fish populations faster than they can reproduce, causing the fish populations to go into decline and possibly extinction. Now, this leads me into my major claim, which is that the practice of catch shares will prevent the negative effects of overfishing. Now, what is a catch share? A catch share is a system that will prevent overfishing by limiting the amount of fish that can be caught in a given season and distributing a percent of how much can be caught to individuals, communities, and other entities. Each holder of a catch percentage is responsible to not exceed their limit. For example, if the limit was 100,000 pounds of fish to be caught in a season, and a fisherman owned 5%, he's only allowed to get up to 5,000 pounds and cannot go over. These measures support the goals of sustaining fish populations, protecting the habitats of other species, and keeping fishermen working, which brings me to my secondary claims. My first secondary claim is that there are economic benefits from catch shares that go towards fishermen and fishing communities. The other secondary claim is that catch sharing improves the local and ocean marine environment. Back to the first secondary claim. I'd like to address the current misconceptions that catch sharing will actually hurt the economy by preventing fishers from catching enough fish to allow them to maintain a livable wage. This is actually the opposite. Because catch sharing gives a guaranteed percentage of the total amount of fish able to be caught to a fisherman, he doesn't have to be constrained in any way, so he can maintain his wage through the percentage he has. So like the 5,000 pounds will be enough to sustain his income, opposed to if he had a bad season, he only caught 3,000 pounds and then lost money. These numbers are all relative too. Now, back to the catch sharing is an alternative to replace the traditional management of fisheries. Now currently, fisheries in America are traditionally managed. Actually, the Environmental Defense Fund has covered that there are 70% of all fisheries in the US are traditionally managed. Now what is traditional management? A traditional management approach is the common model for fisheries, which uses a free-for-all style, which basically has all the participating fishermen in a region go out and try to catch as much fish as they can to compete against each other, because they're still only allowed to catch a certain amount of fish, but the time frame isn't over a certain amount of time. So it's pretty much whoever catches it all first gets to make money. And this results in everyone trying to get it all at once, which has multiple ships having massive loads, but no one's coordinating with each other, so fish populations are declining. This causes overfishing. Now, however, catch shares remedy the shortcomings of traditional management by directly addressing the common property problem of rival non-excludable fish stocks, as each fisherman's stake is secured and there's no incentive to race each other. Pretty much back to the initial point is that because they're not racing, they're not overfishing, they're catching it at a steady rate, which allows the population time to reproduce. Which goes to the next misconception. If there is a limited amount of fish being caught in a given season, the total amount of supply will decrease, which is actually not true. Because fishermen have incentive to allow fish to reproduce, what happens is they'll catch a certain amount of fish, say if the total would be 20 fish, they'll catch 10 fish in the first season, allow that 10 to reproduce, to replenish the stock back to 20, and then the next season they'll catch 10 more. So over the whole course, they still caught 20, just over time. So this leads to a higher market demand, and while supply may seem low, it isn't. It just leads to a higher market demand, which allows fishermen to make their own price, and because of this, they have higher profitability, which overall improves the economic situation for fishermen and fishing communities. All right, So I'd like to move on to the environmental effects. Now I'd like to address the criticism that catch sharing has that just because they're fishing, or like if they're still fishing, that fish populations aren't really like being brought up to a sustainable level. They're just being allowed to reproduce to a point where they could just be killed again, and this doesn't actually allow growth. It just allows a flat number. But in fact, that what the catch sharing does, it doesn't just allow the stocks to replenish. It puts in room for growth so that the fish continue to get bigger, their populations continue to get bigger. Also, catch sharing reduces the amount of bycatch produced in other oceans. Bycatch is basically the unwanted fish that are killed accidentally during fishing. Dolphins, sharks, seagulls, these are all bycatch. And what happens is the United National Food and Agriculture Organization has pointed out that about 25% of the world's captured fish end up being thrown overboard because they were caught unintentionally, which means that like 25% is just being killed off and isn't even serving a purpose of being eaten. It's just thrown away, it's waste. And catch shares, and the reason is because the methods used in the mass fishing industry, traditional management systems, they use things like trawling, which is just dragging a giant net across the ocean floor and pretty much scoops up anything in its path. And because of that, there's just a lot of bycatch being produced. But catch shares don't use these kinds of methods because there's no need to catch it all at once. You catch it over time, so it reduces the total amount of bycatch. And finally, catch shares improve the local ecosystems, mainly coral reefs. Coral reefs depend on fish populations to survive, and if they're being overfished, there aren't enough fish to eat the bacteria and certain algae that would otherwise kill coral reef systems. So with fish populations at a higher level, they're able to sustain themselves without any further danger. And as a final statistics, I'd like to offer a study of the American and British Columbian catch share systems involving over 15 catch share fisheries. And they found that over a decade, the total allowable catch increased 19%, which means the population started to increase over time. Also, that the bycatch decreased 66%, and that fishermen made 68% more money while having 1/3 fewer accidents on the job. These statistics help prove my main claim that catch shares will prevent the negative effects of overfishing.
All right, Derrick, I think you explained the topic pretty well and defined concepts pretty well. I think you need a little bit stronger demonstration of the problem and the solution that you're talking about. The closest you come to actually citing evidence on the solution is that very last section where you have the study of the experience of the American and Canadian fishers, and there's the statistical results you quote at the end. Other than that, there's not really a lot of data that supports claims. There's an explanation of what, I got like 5 different definitions: overfishing, catch share, traditional management, bycatch. I'm getting a lot of terms that are being explained, and I think you do a very good job of that. But I don't, when there's one place where you had a statistic that talked about the percentage that is bycatch. That was also a pretty good supporting point. But everything else is like hypotheticals. Here's how it's supposed to work. Here's what it's supposed to do. And I'm going, okay, well, is there anybody who came up with this idea? Why are they not the ones that you're quoting on this? This is how it's supposed to work. Somebody who's authoritative in studying the fishing procedures that are used, or the growth of fish populations. I'm sure that there are theorists who are responsible for these concepts and defend them. Some of them might be the environmentalists that you make reference to, and we ought to be hearing from them a little bit more. So it's not that I didn't understand the problem that you're talking about. I'm not sure that you document the problem as much as it should be, or that the solution that you present is too complicated. You explain it, but it's all explanation as opposed to something that, we're making inferences from your hypotheticals, and that seems like it's a little bit weak. Like I said, at the end though, I like the specific data that you had at the end. That's pretty strong. The proposition was very clearly identified. The contents are previewed. The phrasing is a little complicated, and at the end of the speech it actually sounded like you had 3 points rather than just the 2 that you started with, so that was a little bit confusing. You do a nice job speaking to the audience. Like I said, the language is usually very clear and easy to follow, your explanations about what you're talking about. If this was an informative speech, hint, hint, hint. He's in my other class and we're about to do informative speeches. You could be talking about this issue and you'd have a pretty good start on, what you're supposed to be doing with an informative speech on this subject. All right, thank you.